So as we were saying, you delve into science and you selectively report, and it's not hard to lead people down the garden path. It's not a bad path to go down if you pick the fruits and vegetables along the way, but that's not what we're talking about. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who will lead you down that garden path with suggestions that there are miracle fruits, vegetables, beverages out there. The notion of superfoods, that if you just eat those, you're going to prevent all kinds of problems. Of course, the nature of those superfoods varies depending on what has been published in the scientific literature. One day it may be acai berry, the next day it may be oil of oregano, who according to this author cures virtually every disease. And whether you have acne, whether you have allergies, zits, it's the universal cure, oil of oregano. Now again, what happens here is that the literature is scrutinized for what oil of oregano does, and there are laboratory studies that show that it has an antioxidant effect. There are even some studies with animals showing some benefits, and then all of a sudden you take that molehill and you build a mountain and start selling books and claiming that oil of oregano is the answer to absolutely everything. The problem is that this is really a misleading concept. The notion that there are superfoods, and that if we only stick to those foods, then all of our health problems will resolve. We do know a lot about nutrition, but it isn't always, as satisfying as what the superfood people would suggest, because we can't offer miracles. Nutrition is very complex, and there are a number of, well, I don't think we can really call them secrets because they're pretty universally known, but there is advice certainly that we can offer about what we should eat and what we should limit. There's no doubt that in North America today we have an epidemic of obesity, and that has consequences. Obesity is linked to heart disease, and it is also linked to cancer. What is causing it? Well, the culprits can be either too much fat or too much sugar. These days, there's a lot of emphasis being put on our sugar intake. And indeed, there's no question that it is excessive in North America. We are virtually addicted to sweet foods and beverages, especially when we look at soft drinks. The amount of soft drinks that are consumed in North America is just astounding, and they harbor a lot of sugar. If we consider one serving of a soft drink, and I'm not picking on Coca-Cola because all soft drinks fall into this category, it's just a very representative example because people, of course, recognize it's the most famous brand in the world. If you look at that can of Coke, the amount of sugar in there is roughly this much, and that's a whole pile of sugar cubes. Of course, you don't see it because it's dissolved in the liquid. It's what we call hidden sugar. But that's a lot of sugar. Now, to be fair, we also need to point out that apple juice, orange juice contain the same amount of sugar. But at least when you consume those, you're getting something along with the sugar. You're getting vitamins, you're getting minerals, you're getting a lot of plant-derived chemicals like the antioxidants, which can be beneficial. But in terms of calories, you're getting the same amount as in a soft drink. So you have to be careful about over-consuming fruit juices as well. But it's the soft drinks that are the real culprits, and that is what we really need to cut down. There are also some nutritional issues that arise concerning the way that we cook our food. Because if we heat food to high temperatures, we produce a number of compounds that have detrimental properties. These are the polycyclic hydrocarbons, the advanced glycation end products, and very often produced when we charcoal broil. And as I mentioned earlier, you know that if it tastes good, there must be some problem. And barbecued foods really do taste good. So you suspect that they are not the best for us, and indeed that is the case. It doesn't mean that you never eat them. But it's not a good idea to barbecue, especially over charcoal, every day. It's also not a good idea to eat a lot of highly processed meats. And I have a bit of trouble telling you this because my background is Hungarian. That's where I was born. And Hungarians are dedicated carnivores, and in Hungary, salami is a vegetable and tofu is illegal. But in science, we go by research, not by our wishes. I don't wish that salami be a problematic food, but unfortunately it is. Because studies have shown that eating a lot of processed meats is linked to colorectal cancer. Again, does it mean that we can never taste this? No. I don't think we should ever say never about anything. But it's always a question of dose. You know, the old adage that only dose makes the poison, well, that of course holds true in the food area as well. So once in a while isn't going to kill you, but certainly you don't want to overindulge. Something that you can overindulge is fruits and vegetables. That's where really the magic lies. This is what the studies show us. This is what we really have to think about, because there are hundreds and hundreds of different beneficial compounds in fruits and vegetables. So we do have to emphasize the intake of 5 to 8 servings every day. And you might think that that's very challenging, but it's really doable. You have a handful of grapes, an apple, a glass of orange juice, and you've had 3 servings right there. It's not so hard to get up to 8 a day. And what the studies suggest is that if we consume that much, we can cut down the risk of many, many chronic diseases, including heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. But once more, numbers matter. We have to eat enough. It's not just a question of eating fruit or vegetable once in a while. Now, there are those people who suggest, gee, I just can't eat that many fruits or vegetables. Isn't it just as good to supplement my diet with vitamins? Don't they make up for the deficiency? Well, no, because there are many, many other compounds in fruits and vegetables than just vitamins. And we're not quite sure which are the really beneficial ones. So while vitamins may provide a bit of nutritional insurance, they're not the answer in terms of making a poor diet into a good diet. In fact, there's a lot of controversy. There are studies that now are showing that people who consume a lot of vitamins are not better off. Of course, one has to be very careful about interpreting those studies, because it also may be that people who consume a lot of vitamins do so because they are already not well. So you can't assume that the vitamins are actually causing harm. But it is somewhat concerning that even the antioxidants, which have been much revered in the studies that are being carried out now, are not providing all the benefits we thought they would. And we see this over and over again. At first, there's some study that comes out that's very optimistic. And then better and better studies get done with larger patient populations, and the effect seems to disappear. The one dietary supplement that still is being looked at in terms of possibly recommending it to everyone is vitamin D. Because without it, calcium isn't properly absorbed. But on top of that, vitamin D also has hormone-like effects, which may protect against various diseases. But the jury is still out on just how much of this we should take, although up to 1,000 international units is really not a concern. It isn't toxic in any way at that level. So in this instance here, it really can be regarded as a bit of nutritional insurance. But if you really want to emphasize good health, well, diet, of course, is important, but one feature of our life that doesn't get enough attention is exercise. If only we could bottle that, but you can't. You actually have to do it. Numerous studies show that if you exercise properly, that's how you can stretch out your years. That's how you can overcome those hurdles in old age. So a proper diet coupled with exercise is the message. But unfortunately these days, that's not where the emphasis tends to be. People are worried about things in their diet, about minor ingredients. They're worried about whether or not there's high fructose corn syrup in there instead of sugar. Well, that's a minor difference. They're concerned about hormone content in meat. Again, I think that's really a minor concern. And certainly genetically modified organisms, that story has been misrepresented in my view, and we will of course be tackling that in this course. And then the idea of having a chemical-free eatery is of course total nonsense. Everything in the world is composed of chemicals, and as we will continue to emphasize, the word chemical is not synonymous with poison or toxin. Chemicals are just the building blocks of matter. They are not to be feared. They are not to be worshipped. They are to be understood. Well, with that little introduction, There's one other aspect I think that bears mentioning, and that is that while here in North America we worry about high fructose corn syrup, we worry about monosodium glutamate, we worry about GMOs, the fact is that there are lots of areas in the world where the worries are quite different, where children are going hungry. In fact, roughly every 3.5 seconds, someone in the world dies purely from not having enough food to eat. And since we've been chatting here today, there probably are about 1,000 people who are no longer with us because they just didn't have enough food to eat. So we have to be cognizant of this as well, and what we can do for the poor of the world by increasing their knowledge about what they can grow, how they can grow it. You know, the old adage is that you teach a person how to fish and you feed them for the rest of their life. If you just give them some fish, well, you may take care of one meal. Similarly here, by giving food, well, it's a short-term solution, but by showing them how to farm properly, providing the right seeds, the right technology, we can do a great deal of good. So we'll be emphasizing both the pros and cons of nutrition. We've also taken into account social situations, just as I mentioned, and hopefully we will be serving up a tasty palette of information as we go through this course.